The Portfolio Composer, episode 217.
You're listening to the Portfolio Composer podcast with your host and coach, Garrett Hope, where he teaches you what it takes to master the business end of writing music through mindset, marketing, and business skills. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter at theportfoliocomposer.com for exclusive offers, business insights, and information not shared on the podcast. And now, for this episode of The Portfolio Composer.
There's another story in the book about a writer named Craig Wiseman, who's, unbelievably successful country writer. He called himself a Walmart writer. Kind of joking, but kind of not. He said, well, I have many times gone to Walmart in Tennessee with a pad and a pen and just hung around. He said, because sooner or later, someone will say something. And I know that if I write something based on what I'm hearing there, that's the audience that buys the music I'm trying to get artists to do. It's country music. So he wasn't dumbing down or anything. He said, I just need to learn what matters to folks, and I'll get that by listening. I thought that was just brilliant.
This episode is brought to you by Dorico, the music notation software from Steinberg. Just released, Dorico Pro 2 is a major new version, including features for musicians working in film and TV music and in jazz, rock, and pop. Steinberg have also released Dorico Elements, a new entry-level application that packs all of the essential power of Dorico Pro into a simple, streamlined package that is ideal for those getting started. Find out more later in the show. Hello, and welcome to episode 217 of the Portfolio Composer podcast. Today's episode is with Mark Cawley. Mark Cawley is a hit U.S. songwriter who coaches other writers around the globe through his one-on-one online service, idocoach.com. His songs have been on more than 16 million records, with cuts ranging from Tina Turner, Joe Cocker, Chaka Khan, and Diana Ross to Winona Judd, the Spice Girls, and many more. His new book, Song Journey, is currently number one on Amazon in 6 categories. From upstate New York, he has lived in Boston, Indy, LA, London, and for the past 24 years in Nashville, Tennessee. Mark, welcome to the Portfolio Composer.
Thank you, Garrett. Pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited to speak with you today because I'm a composer, and kind of as we were just talking about off air here a little bit, I'm a highly trained composer. I too have a doctorate in music, but I've often dabbled in songwriting. And to be honest, it kind of terrifies me because, well, to kind of make the point I made to you just a few minutes ago, I can write an opera aria, I can write an opera, but writing a hit song, that's a whole different beast. And that's your bread and butter right there.
Sure. It's funny, though. I mean, I'm in awe of someone that can do what you do. I cannot do that. Can't even begin to do it. But you and I, off air a minute ago, were talking about the fact that sometimes when these two worlds collide, which usually for me has meant somebody who's very trained wants to write songs. Or, sometimes they do write songs, but a lot of times there's a really odd clash because sometimes the training will keep people from doing the very thing I think you need to do in songwriting, which is like writing like a kid, not paying attention to rules, trying to create something out of thin air, that's just not structured to begin with. So it can create a really funny afternoon sometimes of writing.
We're going to talk about your book today, Song Journey, which just came out, and I will put links to the book in the show notes and everywhere I can, which I highly recommend. And your book does a number of things, and the first thing it does is it walks through the songwriting process. Just right away, you're like, okay, let's write a song. Why did you choose to approach your book in that way? Instead of dealing with all of the business side, you're like, no, let's just make some music.
Well, you know what? There's kind of an easy answer. I coach writers and have been for a few years, for about 7 years. And I do workshops in different places around the world and in the U.S. And in coaching writers, I was able to use them a bit like a focus group for this book. I said, I'm going to write a book, and let's pretend you didn't know me. What would you like to have in a book? And across the board, they said, we would want stories. Like, how did you do it? What happened? Good and bad, the good stories and the horror stories of being in this business, but also, firsthand knowledge of how to write a song. And what I set out to do, and hopefully did, was not a by the numbers book. I mean, there are plenty of those out there. I thought it was best to share what I've learned from other writers over the years, or, learn the hard way, whatever it is. I did want to jump right into some good habits that are not the things I think you would pick up in a normal songwriting book.
I think you did. I appreciated the stories too very much because it wasn't all theoretical. It was like, no, this is how I did it. This is how my friend did it. And this is how you can do it.
I would be lost if it was all theoretical.
Sure.
It's real life stuff. I've done it a long time, and you make a lot of mistakes, but you also write and work with great people, and you pick up on what they do. And those are the things that usually are not in any books that I've seen. And I also felt, honestly, that some songwriting books are not written by people who have actually done it. So I'm always a little superstitious when it comes to those, too. I like to flip a book over and go, okay, have you done what I want to do here? And if so, how did you do it?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big aim for me, for sure.
Right. Now, you bring out a lot of these kind of golden nuggets that you've learned along the way in the book. But just so our readers know your history, how did you come to be a songwriter?
Yeah, it's kind of an old-fashioned way. I started I'm from upstate New York and grew up kind of in the 60s. And I didn't know any songwriters. I didn't know anybody that did this. I was with a great songwriter the other day, a guy named Bob DePiro, who's in the Hall of Fame in Nashville. Wonderful. Same age. And every time you get with somebody like that, you figure out that you all started with Ed Sullivan with the Beatles.
Yeah.
We shared the same story. You saw that and went, oh, wow, how do I do that? That looks great. Even though we were kids, And then a little bit further down the road, you think, wow, these guys are writing their own songs. Now it got a little harder because, you're not born with that one. So it was like you start to learn to write. And probably another funny anecdotal thing about this is that sometimes those songs were really hard. You're seeing all these bands, especially Motown, which I loved. I didn't know how to play those songs starting out. So you make up your own and start writing songs, and it sends you down that path to you write a lot of bad ones. And then they get a little bit better and a little bit better. And, I did start as an artist, and I had record deals, and we were opening for Fleetwood Mac and Hall & Oates and all these wonderful bands in one era. But I was looking at that and thinking, okay, that's another mindset to be a star like that. And I realized kind of early on that what I really enjoyed was writing songs more than I did playing live. It enabled me to be a chameleon too, which to this day I still love to write in different genres and styles. And that's hard to do as an artist. You need to be kind of true to your audience as an artist. So I had, unlimited space to experiment.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to your comment about being true to your audience in a bit, but I think it's really funny that you brought up Ed Sullivan. So one of the things I do in my life is I teach the history of rock and roll at the university, and it's a really popular course. I have 900 students.
Wow.
And we spend a lot of time with Ed Sullivan, starting really with Elvis. And like, okay, what did Colonel Tom Parker do? Well, one of the first things is he got him on TV, right?
Yeah.
And then what was it for the Beatles that Ed Sullivan did for them right when they get off the airplane in 1964? And what did that mean? And why did it take the Stones 3 years of touring in the U.S. before they get on? And I'm trying to get these students to realize how important that show really was.
You know what it was, and I'm sure you do. You're teaching it. But being a kid at that age, there was no internet. There was no way to see these people until you saw them on, Ed Sullivan or Mike Douglas or one of the handful of shows. Dean Martin actually, I think, introduced the Stones the first time. But those shows were your link to this music. You could hear it, but you didn't see these people till Sunday night, usually. You just waited for it. So different from now because, now there's so much access to everything. You feel like you know everything about an artist and you can pick and choose. But those days, it really was what's going to happen Sunday night, who's on, and here comes the Animals, and here comes Joe Cocker and all these wonderful artists. And it's your first look at them, usually. It was just magic stuff. It was great.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I like to pick on my mom a little bit. So my mom would have been like 11 in a small mining town in the Rockies of Colorado when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. And they watched it every Sunday night. And the next morning, my mom made my grandmother drive her down to the salon so she could get a haircut just like Paul McCartney's.
Yes.
It was everything.
Well, I was talking with my friend, the same guy I just mentioned, about our experience, and we both did this. The Monday morning, you got on the bus to go to school, right? And most of the boys were combing their hair down on the bus. Couldn't get home. The guys couldn't get away with it, but you got on the bus and you combed it all down. You got to school and they made you comb it back. You comb it back down on the bus. Anything to try to get that look the next day. It's just, it was such a cultural shift. It was just amazing. It really was amazing.
Oh, yeah. Or, well, it's only like 6 years after that was it David Crosby who wrote the song about being profiled by the police because his hair was long and
yeah, almost cut my hair.
Cut my hair today. Yeah. And then, Lynyrd Skynyrd, they named their band after a teacher that picked on them because they had long hair. And
sure.
Yeah, it's a
long hair would at the same time we're talking about would make your life miserable in school. The jocks, as I would call them, would go after a couple of us that started to grow our hair. Boy, it was tough going for a few years to try to cultivate that look and play music. And now, no one would look twice. But then it was a big deal to grow your hair and try to do this kind of thing.
Oh, sure. And you must have been one of those who ultimately did grow your hair out. You started a rock band.
Oh, yeah. Fast as I could. But my dad would make me go down, literally walk down to the barber shop and get it cut again. I'd come back with, like a quarter of an inch. He'd send me back. But little by little, I wore him down.
It's a big cultural shift right there.
It was huge. The other thing that was really interesting is sort of twofold for me. One was that sometimes artists, like I mentioned, Joe Cocker, my friends who were into music with me, we'd all be dying to see who's coming on. And then we'd talk about it the next day or try to learn the songs. People like Joe Cocker came in on Ed Sullivan, and you looked at him and thought, I thought he was African-American for sure. All of us did.
Yeah.
And you went, who is this guy? He's English and what is he doing with his hands? And, the whole conversation would be amazing because you had no idea who these people were. You heard them, but now you saw them. I did get to write for some of these people later. And those were moments for me that took me right back to being a kid. I wrote for Joe Cocker and Tina Turner and a lot of Diana Ross. And it took me right back to Ed Sullivan. It's such a thrill. It's great.
Well, those guys sang the blues, and the heart of rock and roll is the blues. I don't know if you know this, but I tell this story when we're getting to the Stones in my class. So when the Stones first formed, this is before they even had their major record label contract. They were just a bar band. Mm-hmm. They wrote to the BBC and said, would you please consider playing our songs, our influences? And they listed all these American blues artists from Chess Records in Chicago. And the BBC wrote back and said, we are not going to play this because Mick Jagger sounds too black.
Oh, wow.
And here's this blue-eyed English kid. Yeah. It's because they sang the blues.
Yeah. I'm a huge Beatle fan, but I'm maybe a bigger Stones fan. And I did mention, you mentioned you read the book, but in the book I talked about meeting the Stones.
Yeah.
Those are those moments too. I'm looking at them thinking back to all the songs that I learned of theirs and all the Ed Sullivan shows and found myself like an idiot. I don't know what I said to him. My wife was with me. And met them and all. I said, did I talk to him? I think I did, and she said, yeah, I think, you said hi, but I was like dumbfounded to see those kind of people. It's still got that attraction.
If I remember right, you describe actually having a brief conversation with Keith Richards, and you kind of got a head nod from Mick Jagger.
Keith was the introduction from heaven because my friend Lisa Fisher for years sang background with him. She's phenomenal.
Wow.
And she brings me over and goes, Keith and Ronnie, you must know Mark. He's a wonderful writer. You guys probably know each other. And I'm thinking, oh, they don't know me. They don't. I felt like backing out of the room,
Yeah.
But they were so sweet. Yeah, they were all great. And I was just in awe. My wife did say she didn't grow up with them like I did. They walked away and she said, those are like the thinnest, puniest humans I've ever seen. Well, and the most wrinkled. I got to add that. That's almost sacrilegious. I said, shh, don't call them wrinkled.
Well, they kind of are.
Well, they were. Yeah, they definitely are tiny and they're old,
Yeah. So if you could go back and have that conversation again, and you had time to actually talk, in regards to songwriting, what kind of questions would you want to ask the Stones?
I think Keith and Mick are really underrated songwriters compared to McCartney and Lennon. But I think they wrote, you'd probably agree, you're a fan, they wrote some great pop music.
Oh my gosh. We're still playing it on the radio.
Oh yeah, I'd like to pick Mick's brain a little bit about how he came up with lyrics. And, I've read things about them and stuff. I didn't talk to them firsthand about what they do, but yeah, I'd love to find out their process, especially in those years, and also thank them for, sharing, like you pointed out, they brought what were called race records back then. They brought those to the forefront of American music where it wasn't there before, where they introduced us to our own music at one point.
Yep.
Yeah, you wanted to just say thank you. There's another story in the book. I won't tell it at length, but some of these meetings with people like that, you don't know what to say to them. And finally, one day I was in a bookstore here in Nashville, and Felix Cavallari came in, who was the Young Rascals keyboard player, singer, writer. somebody I grew up with. I grew up in upstate New York. They're from New York. And I finally had a minute of going, you know what? I'm just going to go talk to the guy and thank him. I said, thanks for all this great music. It made such a difference in my young life. And he was the sweetest guy. And we talked about music and he asked me what I'm doing. That was the kind of talk I wish I'd had with Keith and Mick.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the difference was you started with gratitude?
Maybe, yeah. I didn't want to come up as a fanboy, but I did say, hey, I'm from upstate New York. I used to love you. I did see you guys years ago. Thanks for great music, And I think you find, I've done that once in a while with almost heroes, and that is an icebreaker that they're grateful for. And sometimes they're grateful that people still felt them as an influence, especially if they're older artists. And so he was wonderful.
Oh, I bet. Well, you've had a long career here, starting in high school rock bands, and now you're helping other people write music. What are some of the most common obstacles you find with the people who want to write songs that you are helping them overcome as a coach?
That's a pretty good question. Probably lack of confidence sometimes is a biggie. In more technical terms, as technical as I get with them ever, it's usually an editor problem. The editor sneaks in there really quickly in the process. The editor or critic, whichever you want to call it, when it comes in that early, it can derail you totally. So we spend a lot of time talking about ways to not do that, to put that editor literally the trunk, when you make a trip, and pull them out when you get there.
How do you lock that editor away?
From other writers over the years. One was to think of your writing in 4 stages, which is a creative writing exercise. I didn't make it up, but it's helped me. And that is to think of when you're looking for ideas for a song, that's stage 1, that's preparation. Stage 2 could be incubation. You let the idea sit around for a while. Number 3, illumination. You start to shed light on the idea. You literally begin to write the idea with the real stuff involved. Number 4 is basically the editor. Verification is the way it was put in the creative writing exercise. But if you start to think, okay, I'm not gonna get to stage 4 before I'm ready. I'm not gonna start with 1 and jump to 4. And if you kind of visualize that as a writer, you can say, okay, this is my problem today. I'm out of order on these stages. I haven't prepared anything, so nothing's really happening today. Number 2, it's not working because I didn't let it sit around. Number 3 and 4 are the biggies to me. I'd be writing something and go, I'm not writing the real stuff here. Color, detail, things to make this come alive. That's why it's not working. I need to back up and think this through. But 4 is huge. 4 is, if I've got an idea and I start down the road and I am derailed, I think, you know what? I'm editing already. I'm editing first verse and I'm stuck and I'm stopped and I'm, whatever you want to call it. I'm blocked. You can get blocked that way. So when I talk to writers, I do talk to them about a lot of ways to keep that editor out until you need them. And you do need them at the end. You want to look at it all and go, how good is this? How's my rhyme scheme? If you're a lyricist, how strong is my melody? But there's a time for that. And it is toward the end of the process to me.
So is it common for people just to get that in the wrong order?
Yes, really, really common. And for great writers, I know you're always fighting that editor creeping in early. And I have a friend who was really funny for this, kind of famous in my mind for this. We would write, and he's going to go nameless, but he would come into my house all fired up. I've got a great idea. This is going to change our lives. And, peel him off the ceiling and sit him down. And within a minute or 2, he would go from that mindset to going, I don't know who's going to sing. Is anybody going to like this? Even to the point of going, I don't even know how I ever wrote a song in the first place. It was like watching his head spin around for a couple of minutes and then he'd settle down. It was fun.
So he was sabotaging himself, basically.
He was. That editor came in right away and went, what? No. It's almost funny because he's such a great writer. It didn't derail him permanently, but it's part of his process to self-edit quickly and then get out of it.
This episode is sponsored by Dorico, the future of scoring. And we want to feature real Dorico users so you can know that real composers out in the world today are using Dorico to make their careers happen.
My name is Rode Gustafsson, and I am a publisher with my company Recapo Edition. I was one of the first to buy Dorico. I was watching the release on YouTube, and I think it was within a couple of hours I bought Dorico. I have no regrets whatsoever. I bought it and I never looked back. It's my dream program. I am really a fan of the engrave mode, and with the master pages and how the philosophy of music frames and text frames, that you can combine both music and text on the setup that you want. And that's a very important feature for me as a publisher. My workflow has improved a lot, and it sounds nerdy, but it's a joy to work in the program. As soon as you open the program, you say, yes, now I want to create some good music. I think it's a big competitor. There are some features that is not included yet, but I can work 100% of my time in Dorico. And if there is something that I need to do that Dorico doesn't have, I can always do it graphically. I just have to give my congratulations to the team. I am a part of the Facebook group. The Dorico has its own group. The community around it, it's such full of love. And if I have any question, or if the community has any, you just go to Facebook and write, hi, can you do this? Or I can't really find this feature. And almost immediately someone is writing back an answer. I would absolutely recommend Dorico to everybody. I already do that to my colleagues and fellow musicians. And to those who are not sure whether they are the right fits for Dorico, I always say, try to download. It's free for 1 month. Just go ahead, write in some music, and I'm convinced that you won't regret it. It will improve the quality of your music, especially if you're a composer. The output, the raw output, when you just put in the music without editing, it looks beautiful right from the start.
The kind folks at Dorico have set up a special web page so you can go and download a free 30-day trial copy of Dorico. So go and do that. I have been using the program and I'm absolutely in love with it. Go to dorico.com/TPC. So it seems to me that a lot of what you've been saying in the last few minutes is being bold in our actions and turning off that inhibiting self kind of talk. And I'm wondering how that relates to like your chapter on the DIY process, which I absolutely love. Do you think that there is a correlation there?
Yeah, I do. Another good question. I hadn't thought of those together. But yeah, I think what happens is I certainly talk to writers about playing like a kid, because think of it just as easily as you give a kid a box of crayons, 5 or 6 year old even, and they're not looking for an editor. They're not even looking for praise usually right off the bat. They're going to take all those colors and play and play and play until they're having fun. So the DIY thing to me was almost an extension of this idea of, okay, let's really think outside the box. If I have a song, let's not just think traditional methods. Is there a way I can get that song out to somebody? Mm-hmm. And I've done that off and on over the years, and I've had clients do it successfully. And it does take thinking a little bit like a kid. Instead of going, oh, I can't do that, nobody's going to like that. You go, just try it out. So real briefly, one of the ideas in the book was a client of mine in Australia with a song about Stephen Hawking called Stephen Hawking Wants You To. A really bizarre pop song, but very cool. And she said, I don't know any music supervisors. I don't know who would do this song, who would cover it. I don't know what to do with it. She's an artist, but it wasn't going anywhere with that song. So quickly I said, start Googling Stephen Hawking projects. Look for movies, look for little tiny documentaries. And this is before the Theory of Everything, before the big movie about Stephen Hawking. And sure enough, a music supervisor came back and said, we're doing a little documentary. Unfortunately, we think we've wrapped it up, but we love your song, and will you send us future songs, and can we send you future briefs? Now that's a big win. All of a sudden, she's got a music supervisor willing to listen and share, upcoming projects. And that's just a total, why can't I? Why can't I do that? So she did.
Wow. Yeah, what I liked about that exact kind of thinking creatively on how to get your project in front of the right people.
Yeah, it's huge. Can I share one more story with you on this?
As many as you want.
It's an interesting point, I think. Yeah, in the book, I talked about this song called What Would Lennon Do?
Yeah.
This is probably the wildest one I've been a part of. So I had bought an Epiphone guitar because it's the old songwriter joke. There are no songs left in your other one or two. So every once in a while you buy a new guitar and go, let's see if there's a song in it. And being a Beatle fan, it was a John Lennon type Epiphone. Harrison used it as well. And I started playing it and came up with a very Beatlesque sounding melody and chord change. And I thought, I don't even know what I'm doing this for. I don't know who would record it. But I quit thinking about that, which I try to get writers to do too. Don't think too hard, write it from the heart. So I just wrote. And I was going to do something different. I was going to send it. I was going to do a track of it, pretty good, rough recording, and send it to all different writers I've worked with and say, add a line here and there, and let's see where we go. Didn't even know what to call it. I didn't call it What Would Lennon Do? I thought it's very Beatlesque, but I don't know what it is. So the first one I sent it to was one of my best friends, Kai Fleming here, who's another Hall of Fame writer. She's incredible. She called back and said, do not send this to anybody else. Just trust me. And about a day later, she came back with this brilliant lyric called What Would Lennon Do? Like in these times, kind of playing off Imagine almost, the mindset of that. So now we've got it, and we kind of go to the wall and get a great demo. We use Kevin Savadar in LA, who produces Rod Stewart. So we used people we knew, we had access to great people. But at the same time, we're still going, what do we do with this? This is not a normal pitch to an artist. We didn't know anybody to consider it. So here's the fun part. We said, well, let's quit thinking of artists and publishers. And it's a song about peace. Who deals in peace? So this is as wild as we got. And we said, well, okay, United Nations. And we go, anybody know anybody at United Nations? And we, coming up blank for a minute. And then one of the people I coached says, I used to work at the United Nations, and I can give you the right person to talk to. Now, we went all the way to the Secretary General of the UN with the song. And he played it, loved it. He said, nobody's ever pitched a song to the UN. We don't know what to do, but we love it. And we're killing ourselves going, well, this is, just from nothing. We're trying to make something happen. They were willing to put it in their bookstores, and we wanted kind of more than that for it. So we didn't do that deal. But then another friend, same dilemma, a friend of ours said, have you tried Amnesty International? And we said, don't know anybody in Amnesty International. And sure enough, a friend knew a friend who called us and said, here's the person to talk to. So now we're on the phone with them. They come back to us and go, okay, if you'll donate this, we love it. And we'll play it for our board of directors, which is Bono and everybody. And let's figure out what to do with it. This is the funniest part of the whole story. So, and this is how playing like a kid gets really fun. I thought, okay, I just read about a John Lennon tribute, 75th birthday tribute being done in New York. Done pretty quickly to when we thought of it, though, done around Christmas a couple of years ago. And now it might have been November or something. It was pretty close. Anyway, I thought, that's a show, honoring John Lennon with a bunch of different artists. And I thought, we've got what is an amazing kind of John Lennon tribute. And could we get it on there? Now, the initial reaction was, you guys are idiots, because these are songs that John Lennon, they're not going to play a song that John Lennon didn't write. That's not the purpose of the show. But I read that Kenny Aronoff, who's an old friend, he's like super drummer, great session guy and director, was the music supervisor. So I called Kenny and said, can I send you a song? And I told him the idea, and he said, you're nuts. We're not going to do a song that John Lennon didn't write, kind of like the brass cojones, basically, to even think that could happen.
Right.
So I sent him the song, and Kenny calls me, and he's in the airport. He said, I'm in tears. He said, I love this song, and I'm going to give it to the music supervisor, and let's see how far we go. Same reaction. The music supervisor said, are you guys nuts? This is a Lennon tribute thing. I'm not going to do it outside the song. But then we came back to him and said, well, Amnesty International will provide one of their board members to sing it on stage. Will you do it now? And they went, yep, if you can provide Sting, Bono, John Legend, Alicia Keys, one of those who are affiliated with Amnesty, and they show up and sing it, you got it. So this is how wild and far-fetched it was. We got all the way there. We did contracts for the song on the stipulation that on this particular Saturday night, they had to be there. Long story short, we went through everybody and no one could get there. It was Christmas time.
Oh no.
We had an 11th hour. The producer said, I'm in, but I gotta have an okay from one of these artists by 10 o'clock Friday, and we couldn't do it. We had everybody saying, I'd love it, love to do it. We went all the way to Yoko, and that's how far we got with that idea. So we almost landed on a Lennon tribute show without it being a Lennon song.
So close.
But it got heard by, we heard Bono and Edge loved it, and all these people, Sting. But we couldn't get anybody there to commit to being there.
Sure.
It was a wonderful story with kind of a sad ending, but it reinforced to me, don't ask, don't get. We tried everything and just about got there.
Right. You have to take the risk of putting it in front of people.
Sure. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? That's the beauty of getting older too. You think, what can happen? They can call me an idiot, which a couple people did.
Yeah. Well, you're still alive.
Yeah. It didn't change my life at all, But you learn those things. And to me, that's all the way back to your question. It's like playing like a little kid. You go, hey, why not? Maybe this will work. Let's try it.
I'm going to wrap this around to what you said a long time ago. And I told you I was going to come back to it. The idea of the audience, because as you told the story, it becomes really clear to me that this song had a particular context. It had to be in front of the right people. And I think you found those people, and especially for the John Lennon song.
Sure.
It couldn't have happened any other way. You couldn't have taken that to a different festival or concert. It wouldn't have mattered.
No, you're right.
So
absolutely,
you were speaking about audience in a much broader way, because you were talking earlier about making sure that you're kind of making the music that people want to listen to. Am I drawing that connection right, or is that how you're thinking of it?
I think you're right. Yeah, I've learned some lessons writing the book too, and that was to really consider who something's for. Mm-hmm. And when I started to hear this book theory, I thought this is songwriting theory to me as well. You think, who's my audience? I mean, artists think that way. Songwriters think that way, especially successful ones think, who is the audience for what I like to write? And let's consider them. There's another story in the book about a writer named Craig Wiseman, who's, unbelievably successful country writer. And spent a couple days with him, and he called himself a Walmart writer, kind of joking, but kind of not. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I have many times gone to Walmart in Tennessee with a pad and a pen or my iPhone later on and just hung around. He said, because sooner or later, someone will say something and I'll write it down. And I know that if I write something based on what I'm hearing there, that's the audience that buys the music I'm trying to get artists to do. It's country music. So he wasn't dumbing down or anything. He said, I just need to learn, what matters to folks, and I'll get that by listening.
Right.
I thought that was just brilliant. That's absolutely going, let's make sure my audience identifies with what I'm trying to do.
I like what you said about trying to identify what matters to people.
Yeah.
And composers often have a hard time with this, because we are making capital A art, right? And there's this attitude that sometimes the people have to take their medicine.
Okay. Right? Well, yeah, that would be a hard one for writing pop music or country music that you're trying to get artists to do. I understand that mindset.
Yeah, and there is something about, the artist sometimes has things to say and they have to say it no matter what. I get it, and I'm all for that. But I once got on a coaching call with a guy who was helping me evaluate my business and my business plan as a musician.
Right.
And we were talking about the kind of music I'm writing, and he starts asking me about audience. And I tell him what I'm currently doing and who I'm writing for. And he's like, well, do they have any money to spend? Well, no. And he said, well, then you're not going to make any money. And I had these grand plans of writing this particular kind of music for people who were really into that kind of music. And the problem is that there's no growth in the future for that.
Wow.
And now commercial music is all about writing music that's going to sell. But this is where I think there's a big connection between what we're doing in the composition world and what you're doing as a songwriter. Because you're very clearly thinking about not only who's going to listen to it, but who's going to buy it.
Yeah.
And I think that's another component of the audience feature that a lot of people don't even consider.
A lot of writers I coach, I always interview them before I start coaching them. And that's where we can butt heads. There are writers, and God bless them, I'm fine with it, but they'll say, I don't care if anybody likes what I write. I write to express myself. I just write what I want. And okay, If I wanted to be catty, it's pretty easy to go, how's that going for you?
Right.
Is earning a living, but you don't. I think, fine, that's great. And, hopefully write something great and it may connect. But if your goal is to have a living as a songwriter, you have got to consider your audience, consider what, because for me, I write music to share it and to express myself as well. But it's always been about, man, I'd love to have a lot of people hear it, or certainly make a living from it, And for that, you've got to pay attention to an audience, that's for sure.
I'm going to tell a story from the history of rock and roll that I bring out in class.
I love this stuff.
Because we're talking about songwriting. So the Grateful Dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
They emerge from this kind of bluegrass, folky jam thing, and then they watch Dylan pick up an electric guitar, and Jerry Garcia goes electric, and they finally emerge into what becomes the Grateful Dead. And they're doing this acid rock, long-form jazz, tons of improvisation. Warner Brothers gives them a record label deal, throws tons of money at them. 2 albums later, they're almost $200,000 in debt to the label.
Yep.
Because they have that I don't care what people think attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And they finally had this realization, we're not getting songs on the radio. People aren't buying our albums. I mean, they had they had a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand people who loved them at that point. And then they put out Working Man's Dead. And it's like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Here's a radio hit, and there's no looking back. They incorporate, they create a business plan. Now the members of the bands are employees of the corporation.
Yep.
They create healthcare, insurance, life savings, and they're all millionaires.
See, most musicians and songwriters don't like that story in the beginning. They're like, I'm not about business. That's all commercialism. But you can do both. And Grateful Dead was brilliant at creating a tribe. Seth Godin, the business writer, talks about creating a tribe.
Oh, yeah.
They absolutely did it. They didn't need radio airplay after a while. Didn't matter. They had a tribe that would, follow them everywhere.
But they had to get to that point. They had to build the tribe.
Yeah, they did. A couple of singles. What was the one they came back with later? The Gray, something about...
Oh, Truckin'? No.
Later than that. They came back with an Arista hit single that was so unlike them, but it gave them a new audience once again.
Right. Well, there are Grateful Dead incarnations with certain members of that band, like Mickey Hart and a few others.
Yeah.
They're still filling stadiums.
Yeah, John Mayer plays with them, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant. That's great.
So one of the questions I really like asking people who are guests on the show is, what is 1 to 3 actions the listeners could take today to move their career forward? These are actionable pieces of advice that you've learned from your career. Like, just do this no matter which direction you're going to get momentum.
Well, okay, one of them is, I'm not going to call it controversial, but networking.
Okay.
Networking can be a bad word just to some artistic types.
Mm-hmm.
I'll confess, too, I did in the book, I said, I'm not the best networker. I know way better networkers in music than me. But some of it's necessary. You got to find these people, like when I illustrated the Lennon story, within that story, we're reaching out to people who are part of your network over the years. And you don't use them, but you keep up with them and you tap them once in a while. And so I think number one is to do this as a living, as a career. You've got to network. You've got to have people around you who can help you and nourish you, and you give it back to them. But that's certainly a big. Another one for me would be the very topic we talked about: know your audience, or find your audience, because I think it gets easier when you do that. Which is not to pigeonhole you, but you start going, okay, I'm connecting better here because I understand who I'm writing for and how I'm doing this. That makes you a happier, creative human, I think.
Yeah.
You asked for 3.
Well, if you have 3.
Practice.
Practice?
Right.
Sure. Define that a little bit more.
You got to work at it. If you're a songwriter, you got to write 1,000 bad songs. I don't know if I can get away with this on the show, but the Nashville phrase is you write shit, because shit is fertilizer. And sooner or later, out of that, something will grow, So you write a lot of crap and you just have to do it.
Oh, yeah. A lesson I learned as a teenager, because I was taking advanced photography lessons from this amazing artist. And this was in the era of real film, right?
Right.
And we had 36 exposure rolls. And the teacher helped me understand that I might take 36 shots. 3 of them are actually any good.
Yeah, I believe that.
And I found that true to be in the music I write too. Like, I want everything to be amazing. I'm not out to write crap, but you're not going to write a gem every time.
That's for sure. There's another area we haven't talked about that I want to touch on if I can.
Sure.
And that is that, We're talking about knowing your audience, but again, in the book, I shared the story of writing a song that ended up for Tina Turner, who at the time was the artist you're shooting for. And it was a life-changing experience as a creative person. And that was up until this time of writing this song. I got to a position where I was being asked to submit songs for artists. Now that was great. But I was also trying to write, version B of the last hit they had. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I was thinking too hard about their audience and what they like and what they don't like. And I got together with Brenda Russell and Kai Fleming, who are two wonderful writers, and we'd all been having the same experience at that time. Everybody'd had songs recorded and some amount of success, but we thought, Tina Turner, for instance, we'd love to have written for. Nobody was getting there. We got in a room in Nashville and said, you know what? Well, let's trust the fact we know how to do this. We know how to write a song, but let's absolutely leave out the brief. Let's leave out the audience. Let's leave it all out for 2 days. Let's just write something that knocks us out if we can. And we did. And the lesson that came from this was, after all this time, that song, which we thought was an orphan. I mean, we all loved it, but this does not fit anyone that we know of. But the key was we loved it. Couldn't quit playing it. Everybody we knew loved it, but publishers went, I don't even know what to do with it. It's kind of unusual. It gets to Tina Turner and she does it. And we see her interviewed on Oprah saying, somebody finally sent me a song that was just a new direction for me. And this is where I'm going. This is how I'm putting my album together. It wasn't like anything she'd ever done. And all the other ones I'd written that got on hold, and they got to her and then she would turn them down, for instance. So the lesson was, great artists don't want to repeat themselves exactly. They want to be challenged. But at the end of the day, you got to write something that you just can die with, Yeah. And so I started doing more of that. And sure enough, after that was a Cocker one and a Shaka Khan and people I'd been shooting for. But now I'm writing songs that are putting everything I can into it, and a certain amount of homework, a certain amount of audience knowing, but not as much as I had been. And they were much more successful.
So let's see if I can understand this. You are considering the audience, which is the performer and then the people who buy those performers' records. But you're also allowing yourself to be yourself and express what you want to express.
Exactly. And that's the ingredient. I'm sure from writing music, that's the ingredient that's got to be in there. You've got to put yourself in it, or else it's just the, version B of an artist's last song, and it's not going to do it. There's got to be something special, and you got to trust that you've got that, And it's nice when you get verification that something happens and you go, oh, wow, okay, well, that was good. No wonder we loved it. Somebody else loved it. It was a big lesson for me.
Right.
I could not have done that from the start. You do have to copy and you do a lot of that in the early days. I'm sure too, you copy the things you love, but eventually you got to add yourself in there and trust that you got something.
Oh yeah. You have to start somewhere.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, as we wrap this up, I'm going to heap some praise on you, Mark, because I think this is a really good book, not only for some nuts and bolts, how do you write a song? And for composers, this is a lot different than writing art song or aria or whatever. It's a different thing. And then you spend probably almost 2/3 of the book talking about the business.
Yes.
What does publishing mean? What are the income streams? Co-writing, all of that. And throughout it all, you emphasize kind of a holistic lifestyle, meaning balance, not just in your time, but in your relationships. And I appreciate, Mark, so much that you made that a point, that the relationships that you personally have had with your wife and your daughters and making sure that you were actually there. I think that's critical to being a happy and healthy individual, no matter what's going on in your career.
I'm so pleased by that. Thank you very much, because that was a big intent, especially at my age. I thought you got to talk about the life of this, because without the life, I don't think you're going to write great stuff. You're going to do whatever you do. But there was a really quick story of John Mayer speaking at Berkeley, and I love John Mayer. Mm-hmm. And he was talking to students, and I went to Berkeley for the same amount of time he did, which was barely at all.
Well, I've heard really successful Berkeley students don't graduate.
I went for the equivalent of a semester. John Mayer went for 2. But he was talking to students there, and he said, guys, all this stuff coming at you is information. And if you can't turn that into inspiration, which you're usually only going to get by living life, then good luck. I don't know what good it's going to be to you. Mm-hmm. Wow, that was amazing. And as great advice, it was get it all, sure, learn it, but don't forget the inspirational part of this, because that's what's going to do it for you,
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Well, everyone, you can pick up Mark's book called Song Journey, a hit songwriter's guide through the process, the perils, and the payoff of writing songs for a living in all the places you can buy books. Is that right, Mark?
It is. I think Amazon's probably the easiest for people internationally, especially.
Sure.
That would be the best bet, I think.
Well, pick up a copy. It doesn't cost very much, and it's worth the time, whether you plan on writing songs or not. This is helpful to the creative process for sure. Mark, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your stories. I find it absolutely inspiring.
Thank you, Garrett. That was awesome questions, and I really enjoyed this. Appreciate it.
This episode of The Portfolio Composer has been supported by Dorico, the music notation software from Steinberg. Whether you're a composer or arranger, a teacher or student, working in music engraving and publishing, or working in producing music for media such as film, TV, and games, Dorico is the tool for you. Dorico comes in 2 versions, Dorico Pro for professionals and Dorico Elements, providing the perfect introduction to the world of scoring. Whichever version you choose, you'll be using software packed full of smart features that produces beautiful results completely automatically, allowing you to get music on the stand more quickly than with any other software. You can bring music into Dorico from your existing software using Music XML or MIDI, and you can try Dorico out completely free of charge for 30 days by downloading a trial version from dorico.com/TPC. Try it today.